The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being with me at the Danielcode today. Great to have you all. How's the volume, folks? Would somebody just type in the question box? Let me know you can hear me all right. Nothing so far. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Mike, the Murph, and Raj, thank you. Yes. Keith, he's a tutorial guy as well. Right, thank you, guys. You can hear me? That's great. I guess you're all exhausted from counting the money. Hello, Adrian. How are you? Boy, what a week it's been. Just wonderful trading, isn't it? And what we've done is last week we opened up the Danielcode website to give everyone a free trial, anyone who was interested in what we do at the Danielcode. And it was a pretty quiet week, apart from a nice sell in gold and silver. But we had signs of some volatility looming, so I extended the free trial for this week. Boy, you've had an experience, haven't you? Futures has just been absolutely roaring, and we start to see a bit of volatility in this week in Forex as well. But all you Forex guys, keep alert. It's coming. There's going to be some huge drama in the UK over this Brexit and the rows in Parliament, and that is all going to terminate about the 17th, I think, of this month. The 31st of this month is the due date for them to leave Brexit. But the elite are probably going to overturn the will of the people and the will of the Prime Minister. Great stuff, and that's one of the things we're going to talk about today. So great to have you all with us, folks. Albert's with us. He's a tutorial guy. So's Adrian. Colin, Eric, he's a tutorial guy. He's moved to, Eric's now in Dubai. Or at least the Emirates somewhere, I think. Or maybe he's in Saudi Arabia, one of those. Hank down in the Hunter Valley tells me we've had no rain. We are having a terrible drought in Australia. It's really serious stuff, desperate stuff for the guys on the land. I've been through a drought when I had properties at Wagga. And it's a soul-destroying, awful business. Anyway, we've got trading, so we're lucky. The pot never runs out with trading. Howard from New Zealand, welcome, Howard. Good to have you with us. Howard's probably going to come and do the tutorial at the Gold Coast, live with John Needham. For 3 days up close and personal, and he's also going to be in Melbourne for the running of the Melbourne Cup, Australia's great event, great staying race. And I know he'd be terribly disappointed that the girl singer, very pretty girl, was coming and is now not coming because the politically correct people. Terrified her with all the bad stories about racing, etc. Which is in this country, it's not so. It might apply to the States, but certainly not here. Keith's with us. Good, Michael. Pell over there hiding in. Are you still hiding in Nicaragua, or are you elsewhere now? My friend Murph, he's Danielcode tutorial guy. Milton's with us, Peter's with us, Raj, good to have you with us, Raj, Scott, Sue up in Cairns, good to have you with us, Sue. Eric tells me he's in Abu Dhabi. Some of you will remember Eric. He did a tutorial in the States a few years ago. Anyway, great to have you all with us, and wow, the trading's been really something, hasn't it? Okay, let's move on, and let's talk about all the things that are happening. So those of you who are not a drop of rain down in the Hunter Valley, boy, that's where all the lovely horses are. It's where the thoroughbreds, the equivalent of Kentucky, I suppose. Not a drop of rain, horrible. Okay, so we know about the Danielcode now. It's rational, orderly, and sometimes predictable, as you will see from the results we've had this week. And let's try and get moving on. Here we are. Folks, the Gold Coast tutorial. I'd like you, please, to let me know by the 20th of this month if you're coming. John Needham, live at the Gold Coast, 13, 14, 15 November. 3 days up close and personal with me, talking about trading and anything else you're interested in, but we're going to take your skills to the very next level. For those of you who've already done a tutorial, do consider coming. I'm going to teach you a whole lot of new stuff. The Danielcode's always producing new stuff, and we'll talk about a little bit of that as we go along today. So that's looks like that's Surface Paradise. That's why we call it Welcome to Paradise. That's Surface Paradise Beach at the Gold Coast, and there are many of them, and it goes for miles and miles and miles. A beautiful white sand, great surf, clean air, wonderful, wonderful place to live, and a wonderful place to visit. Okay, so here's a good reason why you should do a Danielcode tutorial. This is from Mick D. And he's the most interesting guy. I've actually known Mick for, I'm going to say, pretty close to 25 years, because my daughter's 24, and might have been around 23, 24 years I've known Mick. His sister's a great friend of mine. She actually introduced me to futures trading. What the distant past, there we are. And Mick's done a Danielcode tutorial, and he's thrilled with it. And so this gives you an idea. It's not so much what I say about thank you, Howard. Taylor Swift. Gosh, we've got some trendy, switched-on people here. I know she's a very pretty girl. That's about all I do, but now you've jogged my memory. It's Taylor Swift was coming to sing at the Melbourne Cup. Howard, you'll be disappointed. She's not coming now. The naysayers have got hold of her, and she didn't take much to switch her off. But Howard's actually got a horse running in the Melbourne Cup, so he is going to have a great day anyway, despite everything else. What a thrill. What a thrill indeed. No, he's not really sad. He could care less either. Okay, terrific stuff. Okay, so that's why you should be thinking about doing a Danielcode tutorial, folks, because the market's nearer the end of the bull run than the start. I can tell you that. And once it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to get a crash. They're going to move heaven and earth. Mnuchin and the rest of Trump's team will be moving heaven and earth with the plunge protection team and whatever else they can do to keep the market up. That's Trump's great contribution to American life, really, although his supporters would say there's lots of other things. I mean, he's produced a most beautiful and delightful First Lady, for which we should all be grateful, you Americans in particular. That's how I'd say it's a mate's horse, not mine. 78 of us are coming. Good on you. You'll have a great time. In another life, Howard, I used to run Magic Millions, the horse sales company at the Gold Coast, when it was a teeny tiny before it became a giant. And in a previous life, when I was in the horse sales business, we used to have a marquee at the Gold Coast, the Melbourne Cup, and other big race meetings around the country. So yes, I've done quite a few of them and enjoyed every one of them. Okay, let's get back on topic. You're going to find that the buy and sell, buy and hold, is not going to work. It's probably not working now, but the beauty of futures is it makes as much money going down as it does going up. So if you understand trading futures, you don't have to be frightened of markets. You control the markets, and it's never going to end. Mick, it's going to be there for you forever and ever. It's a wonderful gift, but you do have to know what you're doing. Otherwise, it's terribly dangerous. My main thoughts about this week is that it's a weird world, and it really is a weird world. The drama coming out of the American press, and it is largely driven by the media. I mean, we can put down a whole lot of our problems to media, and basically what's happened is there's too much time and not enough news. So we have the growth of the commentators who are not actually reporting news. They're just giving you their opinion or their version of what's happening, and the hate between the Democrats and the Republicans at some levels. I mean, it's really amazing, particularly amazing to me because, politics in Australia is sort of very ho-hum. Nobody cares. The most common view of Australia you'll hear is it's laconic, it's lackadaisical, and the most common expression is "she'll be right, mate." In other words, don't worry, be happy. Australians in general couldn't care less about politics. We have to have compulsory voting in this country. Otherwise, estimates are that you wouldn't get more than 11% of the population voting. So we're pretty much apolitical until we're forced to vote. It's amazing the passions that are aroused in US and also in the UK. We see the same thing over there. It's extraordinary. But here's a picture about the unlovely Mrs. Warren, who looks like a typical old school mum, doesn't she? I mean, the cardigan seemed to be her go-to gear, and she's a socialist. I think she's, at the moment, of course, I think she's looking like the front runner. Joe Biden, I don't know how long he can last. He's got one eye bleeding and his false teeth are falling out, and he hasn't aged well. Compare him to Trump, who's pretty much the same age. He's a terribly fit, terribly vigorous man, and it's going to be fascinating seeing the 2020 presidential election. But politics, if you think about it, is always about bribery. It's the curse of socialism, because what politicians are doing essentially is they're making offers to the public, and they're enticing them with what they believe are policies that the people will find attractive. But to do that, these policies always cost new money. And the thing about liberals is that you can take that even further for socialists, is that it's government by the elite. They are firmly of the opinion that they, the elite, know best. Now, that doesn't always mean it's the politicians. More often than not, it's the long-term bureaucrats who really run every country, one way or the other. They're the force that never goes away. But liberals are people who are unhappy with the status quo. They're always striving for something new, something better. And you can understand that. You think about the world or your state, your country, your town, whatever it is. You can always see lots of things that could be done better. That is the reward or the benefit, if you like, of liberals. They're never happy with the current status. They always want to do something new and better. The problem is it always costs money to do those things. And the point of it all government, is that governments don't have any money. The only money they have access to is what they raise by compulsion from the populace. And with socialists, they always want to spend more, and that's why liberals are always a disaster, because they're pushing for something new, something that hasn't been done. And I'm sure they're very egalitarian. They think it's best for the country, best for the people. but it's this question of cost. Who pays? And there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of emphasis on that in the States. I mean, you've got with the current administration, and let's face it, Obama pretty well single-handedly the money that was spent under his administration was absolutely unbelievable. But to be fair, the present administration is doing much the same thing, and the national debt is absolutely massive. But that politics is always about bribery. Politicians have to offer something to their base, or the ones they hope to entice to vote for them. And all of these wonderful grand ideas they have cost money. So, yes, I understand that there's lots of things that could be done better, but who pays? If you're a socialist, the rich pay. Well, right now the rich are paying anyway. We have a progressive tax system in most of the Western world, but I can see the temptation, because the gap between the truly wealthy and the rest of the population is pretty staggering. And my personal politics are somewhere to the right of Genghis Khan, so you can't accuse me of being a socialist, but I understand what they're doing. In fact, the last election in Australia in May, we had a contest between the incumbent government, the Liberal National Party. It's a coalition. It's not Liberal at all. It's actually the Conservative Party of Australian politics, and Labor, the so-called Workers' Party of Australia. And Labor had a policy of just raising taxes big time, and they're quite open about it. Their potential treasurer came out and said, well, I want to give the party as much money as I can possibly raise so that they can do all these great things that they want to do. But that meant slugging a lot of people, a lot of money. They had three separate major policies that raised money, either by new taxes or by reducing rules that allowed people under the tax laws to reduce their income to some extent. And that just didn't fly. But I fear that America at this stage is walking into a bit of a socialist trap there, and I'm waiting for someone to start banging the drum about tell us the real cost of all these great policies. Medicare for all, is that a good policy? Absolutely. Nobody wants to see one of our fellow citizens sick and not able to get medical care. Absolutely, it's a good policy, but you've got to tailor it very carefully, because the cost is absolutely massive. Health costs, as you all would know, everywhere here as well, are just going through the roof, and be very careful about those costs. So that's why Liberals are always a disaster, because they're trying to do new things that they believe will benefit the populace. But and the ideas are good in many cases, but the execution is always a disaster. We've had so much of it in this country, where we had to put up with a couple of Labor Party leaders for some years, not too long ago. Total disaster. So beware what you wish for. So she's got to come up with the goods that she's going to offer, as do all the others. And the one thing about all of the policies of the Democrats is what's it going to cost, and who's paying, and how. And pretty soon, of course, unless there's a change in trajectory, Republicans are going to be getting asked the same question, because the national debt in the US is massive and roaring, going through the roof. Okay, so that's a bit weird, what's happening there, and they're not alone. This is being weird in the UK. I've talked about this before. We've got this extraordinary situation over Brexit, which is Britain exiting the European Union. And just to recap all of that, so you know, David Cameron, who was a previous Prime Minister, equivalent to your President, slightly different, elected by the members of the Parliament in the party, not by the population at large, but he's the leader of the government. The Prime Minister, David Cameron, he decided that he would have a referendum. There was so much noise about Britain's relationship with Europe, and Britain's not really a European country. Its mores are different, its customs are different, and there'd been so much noise about the 40 years that Britain had been in the European Union that he took the brave step. It was part of a promise he'd made to keep his position as the leader of the Conservative Party, the Tories as they're called, that he would have a referendum. And a referendum, of course, is when the government says to the people, you can vote, and we'll take our direction from you. Cameron and his allies campaigned hard for Remain, that is, remain in the European Union. And the opposition came from this blonde, fuzzy-haired guy that you can see here, who is Boris Johnson. And Boris is a real character. He's a bit of a toff. He's an Eton and Oxford man. Brilliant writer, great wordsmith, writes exceedingly well. He's been a parliamentarian on and off a number of years. He's been editor of The Spectator, the satirical magazine, and he writes for various leading newspapers at various times. And then he became Mayor of London, and he absolutely did a sterling job as Mayor of London, one of the biggest cities in the world. Did a wonderful job there, and he was the one who was heading up the Leave campaign to leave the European Union. And he got up, to the surprise of many. The people voted by a pretty decent margin for these sorts of things. I mean, most opinions in public life, you can find 6 of one and half dozen of the other. But the Leave campaign got up, and all the politicians duly vowed that they would take their instruction from the population. And David Cameron lost his position. He resigned as Prime Minister, as he had to, and this guy, Boris Johnson, stood to run as the leader of the Tories, and they wouldn't have him. It's the two-tour proppy system. They didn't want someone like Johnson, who's flamboyant, very, very gifted, very capable. But what they did is they went back to the old hacks. They got Theresa May, who'd been a minister, Home Minister for the Cameron government, and surrounded her cabinet became all the good old boys who'd been in the Cameron Parliament. But the reality is that almost all of them supported Remain. The two guys really, Johnson and Michael Gove, who pushed for the Leave campaign, they got positions in the cabinet, but they didn't last terribly long. Boris resigned after a number of months, and then Theresa May, disaster struck with her. She came up with a scheme to put to the European Union for a potential agreement for Britain to leave the European Union. But what it was, in effect, it was really Remain in drag. In other words, she came up with an agreement that left all the power with the European Union and tied Britain to being subject to the European Court, to all of the rulings of the bureaucrats who really run the European Union, and the Parliament rejected it, and they rejected it 3 times in different versions of it. So she had to resign, and Boris became Prime Minister. And now he's facing the same thing, the different side of that same edge. He has said that this is the will of the people that they voted for. The government promised that they would do what the referendum said. It's the actual policy of the Conservatives to leave, to either get a deal, failing that, to leave the European Union at the end of this month. And it's caused uproar because all of the leaders of the Remain group that were the government, parliamentarians were the cabinet, they're in Parliament, and they banded together with the opposition, the Labour Party. That's that scrawny-looking chap you see on the left of your page, or it's on my left, at least must be on your left, whose name's Jeremy Corbyn, and he's a shocker. He is a dyed-in-the-wool serious socialist, has been a member of the Communist Party, and funny thing about politics, excuse me, the Labour Party had a spill of their leader, and they called for nominations, and 4 or 5 of the leading lights put their hands up, and one of the members of the executive said, look, there's no real left-wing candidate here. We ought to at least have the appearance of giving our members a chance to vote for someone who represents the different spectrums of the Labour Party. And they came up with Jeremy Corbyn, who's on the far, far left. He is a great admirer of some of the Arab terrorist groups, has been involved with them. He's a serious socialist in terms of we're going to nationalise everything, and we're going to take 10% of all the big public companies and vest that in the public, or God knows what they're going to do or how they're going to do it. But he's a serious left-wing socialist, probably very close to a communist. So they decided to put Jeremy Corbyn up as a bit of a joke with, no support, and he'd been in Parliament for 30 years, and very few people had ever heard of him. Lo and behold, he turned out to be a very, very effective campaigner. And he's got a sort of a really endearing and grandfatherly image as a campaigner. And he's very energetic. And probably the greatest surprise since Leave won the Brexit vote was with Jeremy Corbyn getting elected to lead the Labour Party. And he really stirred up the grassroots, the young millennials. I mean, there's all sorts of stories about it. Very, very interesting. But he is the leader of the Labour Party, and he is the potential Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. If these rebels, these so-called Conservatives who are voting with him to defeat everything Boris puts up, boy, that brand of socialism, they really are the masters of bribery. Excuse me, that's all coming to a head around about the 17th of this month, and then the 30th, the last day of the month, is when they're supposed to leave. But the Parliament, the rebels combined with the Labour opposition, are forcing Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of United Kingdom, to ask the European Union for yet another deferral. I mean, it's been over 3 years. They've had to come up with a deal or come to an arrangement. And I mean, Theresa May, spare me. It's just, you wonder what they're useful for. Anyway, the thing about socialism is a young lady told me this some years ago. I was at some function or other, and she was a very pretty young girl in a nice little black cocktail dress, and we were having a chat, and she told me, did I know the most disgusting 4-letter word beginning with F? She said, I thought I did, as no doubt some of you have the same thought. She said, no, the word is free. It's the most disgusting word in the English language. The most disgusting four-letter word beginning with F is free. Well, of course, no one's told socialists that, because nothing's free but their promises, gifts to the population to try and get their vote. It's not free. They tell them it's free. It's free to the person getting it, but the rest of us are all paying for it. Really, it is a weird world. Okay, let's see what else we've got. So, this is a bit of a trend around the world now, because New Zealand has a socialist PM as well. She's the Tooth Fairy. Her name is Jacinta Ardern. You can see her photo down here. She's a very, very attractive girl. Got huge teeth she finds it hard to close her mouth, but she's a socialist. She was voted International Young Socialist of the Year not so many years ago, and she got into government in New Zealand, I think really because the population was sick of the old conservative government. It'd been there a long time, had a very charismatic leader, John Key. He'd retired, and there wasn't much to offer without him. So the voting was fairly close, very close actually, and New Zealand has one of those silly electoral systems, MMP, that nobody can get an absolute majority. You have to have a coalition, which is supposed to I don't know what it's supposed to do. It's a stupid system, in my view. However, she was able to form a government in conjunction with a very smart old Kiwi politician called Winston Peters, who is certainly not a socialist. I know Winston personally very well over many years, and whatever he is, I can tell you he's not a socialist. So that's curbed some of her worst tendencies, but truly it's a disaster. What was their signature thing? They were going to spend millions and millions of dollars building 100,000 affordable homes. Just hasn't happened, as usual. Wonderful idea. I mean, everyone would like more people to have their own housing, but there's a cost to all of this stuff, and it just hasn't been able to happen. So getting away from all the socialist nutters of the world, I would be remiss if I didn't tell you about Alexander Downer, who's the gentleman with the glasses on, standing in front of the Horse Guards at Horse Guards Parade. And he's the present Australian ambassador to Great Britain. And like most ambassadors, all he is a failed politician. And Alexander in particular, he's a very nice guy. He's very personable. He's a very gentle soul. He comes from Adelaide, where they're all, Adrian would know, they're all very nice people down in Adelaide, much nicer than the Sydney crowd, I can tell you. And his father was a leading politician. He was, in fact, Premier of South Australia, Adrian, if I'm not mistaken. So he came from a politically connected family and got into the Liberal National Party coalition. Tried to lead it a couple of times, failure. He's one of these guys, never had a job in his life, just been on the public teat forever. And then when he got bumped from the Liberal Party very sotto voce, the members had enough of him and he wasn't offering anything anyway. They gave him the sinecure of being ambassador to Great Britain. And Australia has the most magnificent ambassadorial residence. The Australian Embassy in London is really very, very fancy. So being a lifelong one who dwells on the public teat, Alexander jumped in at that. But then he got involved, amazingly, in the Trump issue. The young guy, I forget his name, it's pretty forgettable. He did a spell, he did a short prison sentence for, he was Mueller and co. Said he'd been involved in trying to negotiate discussions with Russia, or absolute rubbish. But he actually went and had a drink at a club with Alexander Downer in London. It's about all Alexander Downer would be useful for is having a drink. Very sociable guy, just not effective in any other way. But they had a drink, and the other guy obviously was excited about Trump's victory in 2016 and talked too much, and Downer promptly reported it to the Australian Securities Authority, ASIO. I mean, I'm absolutely surprised that Alexander Downer could even find his way to ASIO, but I guess he's got lots of staff who did it for him, and reported it, and that's the great was the great trigger for so much of this Russia scandal that Trump's been battered with, and anyone who knows Alexander Downer, the idea is totally ridiculous. Anyway, that's what happened, and that's who he is. He's another one who's lived on the public teat all his life. So the only place I can tell you that is really sane politically is Australia, because Australians just don't care about politics. They don't revere their politicians. They really ignore them pretty much. And they don't really think they're people of any great importance or virtue. And I think that's a very healthy attitude to have. And, of course, this is going around the world. They're not just being weird in the States and New Zealand and the UK. They're being weird at the UN. This is a picture of this little girl who I had to Google to remember her name. Her name's Greta Thunberg, and she's a young lady from Sweden. And she had been the leader, or the figurehead at least, of a highly organized, terribly, terribly expensive, massive international media campaign about global warming and climate change. And for those of you who've been lucky enough to miss it, she sailed over from Sweden or wherever she was to the States, with a professional crew. Of course, she just had to sit there and look contented. In a very, very expensive composite yacht, carbon fiber, Kevlar, all those things. Massive emissions when it's being built, and equally massive emissions when it's destroyed one day. Anyway, this was all put together, and we were bashed continually with the media about this young lady. And this is the one who went to the UN and chastised everyone. How dare you, she said to anyone who was listening at the UN. And of course, she got very cross because she was standing with her handlers. It's not this kid's fault. She's just a young 16-year-old, but the handlers, this has all been coordinated through the United Nations. Massive cost, massive media presence, and she was standing there looking very forgettable and forlorn, waiting to make a grand entrance to the UN, and Trump rolled in right in front of her, big and bold as brass, with this massive entourage following around behind him. Just walked straight past, and she got very upset about that. But the question I'm trying to make here is, who pays the bills? I mean, this stuff's not cheap. Massive international media campaign, professional sailors to charter this boat, or maybe someone donated, I don't know. It had to be sailed across. It had a support crew. People had to fly forwards and back to get all this set up, and to get back to wherever they came from after she'd been delivered to the States. And the answer is, who pays the bill? The UN's paid the vast majority of this amount. I can't give you my negative comments about Sweden because my wife is Swedish, and and also a Kiwi, Howard, but by family she's Swedish, and they're very lovely people, but they're all socialists. But this massive expenditure of money, I mean, when do any of these? I mean, who pays the bills? The UN, taxpayers all around the world. We do. Australia, the US is the biggest contributor of all of them. It's your tax that's going to pay this stupidity. And I mean, really, it is I guess nobody seems to care. Money just seems to be endless for them. But they're not earning it. They're taking it from us, the taxpayers. Anyway, let's move on a bit because time is running, and let's talk about other places you can find sanity. True sanity is the futures markets. They're there. They're never going to stop. They make exactly the same money going down as they do going up. And once you know how to trade futures, you can make a considerable amount of money. Hank, should we not keep paying them after they've been voted out? Well, there's the thing. The retirement benefits for our politicians are absolutely ridiculous. Did she have a hot shower before she spoke? I don't know. Thank you, Hank. This is all of you who've had been having the free trial of the Danielcode have been able to see the fourth seal, which is prepared for me by Frank DB. He's a Belgian gentleman. He's actually a farmer by profession, but he came to see me in Taupo with his fiancée, Anne, a very lovely lady at the time I met her. And she's now his wife, and they have two lovely children. But when Frank came to me, he'd never seen a financial market chart, ever. And he's now not only one of our very, very best traders, but he runs the fourth seal for me. And you can see he absolutely, this chart is from this week's posting. You should have been able to see it at the website. This is a 24-day chart. Each bar is 24 days. So this is a long-term chart. And this is the equivalent, if you like, this is the Danielcode equivalent of a monthly chart. And that red line, diagonal red line, the horizontal ones are the ones you see from your Danielcode tool of retracement, but the diagonal one, that's the fourth seal. It's been on this chart for months and months and months, and the market has absolutely, or Frank I should say mainly, has absolutely nailed it to the tick, exactly to the tick. That big up bar you can see. Market was in a huge rush to get there. Where was it going? Straight to the Danielcode fourth seal line, and that's what stopped it. So do take the opportunity to read Frank's comments on the fourth seal. He does S&P gold and crude oil. Do take a chance to read them. They're marked under the fourth seal on the Danielcode website. And that was just absolutely bit of perfection. Well done. So there are a number of ways of getting those turns. This here is from a very long-term Danielcode member, 333 Naz. His name is Larry, and he posted this on forum about before the gold had its recent turn down, and he set out exactly how he runs the Danielcode counts using the DC numbers, 44 weeks. The low here versus the high there, time and price looking rather squared. He was spot on. He did a great job, and it was good that he was there to share it with you. Incidentally, talking about long-term Danielcode members, I'm very sorry to hear Jim C. He's in Tennessee. He's the howdy guy. He starts off all his emails to me with howdy. And Jim has been with us forever. He's one of the longest-serving Danielcode members. He's just been here for a very, very long time. And he emailed me today to say he had a turn and woke up in hospital. And under Tennessee law, he can't drive for 6 weeks or 6 months. I'm not sure which. Let me just see if I can find this for you. Yeah. So he can't drive his car when he gets out for 6 months. But he's certainly on the ball. He says here they started him. He's still in emergency ER. They started him in room 14 and moved him to room 29. And soon they're going to give me a room outside the ER, and it's going to be, I understand, room 89. All of these are Danielcode numbers. I mean, he's right on the ball, so that's terrific, and that's really good to hear, Jim. You haven't suffered in the brain at all, mate. You're right on the job. But get well. You've got too many wonderful qualities and lots of friends who are thinking about you. Okay, so there was Naz's contribution of the same thing. I thought was very clever. Well done. Love to see that. And he's followed it up today with another post in Forum, and he's getting his signals from Huey, and the Huey, dollar Huey, for those of you who don't know, is an index. You can't trade futures on it. It doesn't have any futures attached to it. You can trade options, though. But the Huey is actually the index for the unhedged, 25 unhedged gold miners. And it's an alternate. It's so highly correlated with gold, and for that matter, silver. All three of them, Huey, gold, and silver, are also highly correlated, that a signal from any one of them can be executed in any other, provided the trade is elected. Don't forget about these correlations. You'll see that there's a big reversal in the equities and Germany's DAX today, and I just put in one buy signal. It'll be a counter trend buy for the S&P, because all of those markets, Dow, Russell, Nasdaq, S&P, and Germany's DAX, are also highly correlated, that a signal in any one can be executed in any other, provided it is elected. Now, I know that the Russell's decoupled a little bit from some of the others, but as a general rule, they are so highly correlated directionally, but not by quantum, just directionally, that a trade in one is valid if it's executed in any other market. And that's what Larry's done with his analysis of Huey, and I thank him for sharing it with us. He's very, very clever. Well done, mate. Okay, so let's have a bit of a look at what's been happening with time cycles with gold. So this is the gold COMEX gold chart. And you can see a number of lines on them. Some of them have numbers on them, 44, 59, 62, and 70. They're the dominant Danielcode time cycles, and they're accurate to plus or minus one period. So whether it's on the 6-day chart or the 12-day chart or the daily chart, indeed, they're accurate to plus or minus one period. So that's 1 day on this chart. And you can see the blue line at the left of the screen. That actually comes from a low before the low, and as it's run through, it's given us an interesting counter trend at 59, very minor, and at 62, and then the 70 has hit the impulse high 1 day before the real high in this move in gold. So plus or minus 1 day, that's within the realm of accuracy that we allow, which is pretty tight limit, you'll agree. And moving that same ratios along, it's 44, 59, 62, and 70. We've now taken it from a swing high. You can see the blue line on the left of the page is where we've started this count, and it's given this the counter trend high with the big reversal bar. It was a huge momentum up day at 44. It's nailed that perfectly to the day. And of course, then if you look further along, you'll see that 59 and 62 gave us nothing, and 70 gave us the low, which has just started to turn gold back up again. And here's a continuation of the same theme. We've now starting from a swing high between two highs. So this is a lower high, or the high before the high, if you like. And you can see here that we've now got the counter trend high in September absolutely perfectly to the day. And we've got a 70 cycle expiring tomorrow. So it could be valid for today or tomorrow. And valid for plus or minus 1 day. So you can see how accurate these time cycles are, and those who've been following the 6S this week, you'll know that it's plus $30,000 or $35,000 at yesterday's close. This is gold also, and what I wanted to just show you here was the ability to use shorter term trading. When we get into these very big bars that you get whenever there's a decent sniff of volatility around, the market is so tightly wound at the moment that any down moves are triggering these very big bars, particularly in the equities, but also in gold. And you can see this is the 6S sell last week. We got in just where the 6S sell signal says we did. And on the orders for the first of the month, what it said was short with a 1 bar stop, meaning we're presently short with a 1 bar stop, and $4,900 valid to exit. So the signal for that really big bar down was valid to exit. So these are not 100% performers, but they're very, very good. When we get these big bars, we'll often get this valid to exit signal. So that would have put nearly $5,000 into your pocket on one contract, one trade. And let's have a look what we've got to learn from this, because I'm going to start. I've had a very mixed relationship with short-term trading. I should tell you, if you don't already know, that over the years I've traded any combination of markets and price and various tricks that you can think of. I spent some years trading, would you believe it, 3 tick charts on the S&P. I was up when I was living in New Zealand, Howard. I told you we lived at Taupo for 12 or 13 years. And in those days I would stay up every night, all night, because of course the US trading day is our night time, and trade 3 tick charts. So if you can imagine it, I've done it. But what I've shown you here is when we get these big volatility, and we're going to have tons of volatility going ahead, folks, markets are just going to be more and more volatile for the next couple of years at least. And when you get these really big bars, you'll find that the normal place to put your stops on trading the daily system that I teach are way outside your risk parameters. So you either need to learn how to trade short-term trading, short-term charts, or else you need to just stand aside. And I hate standing aside. I mean, I am personally offended if I get out of a market and it gets a whacking great big bar. I like to be in the market all the time. This chart here, you'll see at the top of it, it says NYMEX 10,000 trades bar. This is not the chart we use. I've just put this up to show you an approximation of the Danielcode short-term trading. And this is gold, and you can see that we've had the run-up that we've just inspected. I'll show you this in the daily chart in a moment. Then we've had the row down. We've had one losing trade of $800-odd, and we've had 4 winning trades, some part of a bit more than $10,000. If you're using these entries and exits. And this is what one of the new things I'm going to be teaching at the Gold Coast tutorial. So I've done every form of short-term trading you can think of, and generally speaking, the most profitable form of trading is actually trading daily bars, which is why that's the main emphasis of the Danielcode. But short-term trading is a skill, particularly in times of volatility, which is what we're heading into for the foreseeable future. In times of volatility, if you have the skill to be a short-term trader, you get better entries, and you can finesse your exits. And you can see here, just the difference that these trades, these entries and exits have made. So I'm going to teach you short-term trading at the Gold Coast tutorial. once you've got it right, and I'll give you the Danielcode template, and once you've got that right, you can alter it for any time setting you like. So you can go from basically what this is just about a half a day. It's a very, very gentle form of short-term trading. But you can, once you've got that template in place, you can turn that down to as little as a minute, if you like, if you really do like watching ants climb the wall. But there is a lot of skill in short-term trading. We actually have some clients who might even be with us today who that's all they do, short-term trading. They're very, very good at it. Not as good, I might add, as the Danielcode, because the Danielcode template, once you have it, is infinitely adjustable to optimize for any market conditions. So let's have a look. This is the same chart, believe it or not, on a daily chart. And this, as I say, is a very, very gentle version of it, but you can see we get into the trade earlier. We protect our profits more effectively if we didn't take the exit, valid to exit. If we didn't take that signal, we did get out of the sell trade at better than the normal entry position at daily highs and lows. And that's because these bars are getting big. And you need to be able, if you've got those skills, it's quite marked how much it improves what your returns are. The other thing we're doing at the Danielcode Gold Coast tutorial as well is I'm teaching you for the first time swing trading. And these trades run from about 3 to about 29 days. You stay in the market much longer. I'll still maintain trading daily bars is the most profitable, but there are lots of people who are more comfortable with trading at a more leisurely pace, taking fewer trades, and the swing trading that I'm teaching on the Gold Coast will certainly be something for that. So it would not be fair to tell you about all the good things from trading without telling you the bad things. And here it is. This is what happened over the weekend 2 weeks ago when some sort of Arab terrorist attacked the Saudi Arabia oil processing plant, and it was on a weekend, and the little orange bar you see, I'll put the cursor on it, see if you can see it right there, that's Friday, and the attack came over the weekend, and the news was everywhere. So at the open Monday, look where this market opened, it gapped up from where we entered. That gap was about over $4,000 per one contract. From where we were short, which was right at the bottom 2 days later, it was even more. So that was a seriously nasty blow. And you have to understand with futures trading, there is risk. This is a very, very unusual risk, but it does happen. And the whole point of it is that if you take a long-term view of any of these markets, as all my tutorial guys do, because I ask them to trade a whole year of one market, a whole year of another market. These sort of events on a lesser scale do go on, but the point is the program compensates for that. It knows that happens, and the answer, as I've said here, is stay calm and carry on. And you can see the karma of the markets. We lost $4,000 on that trade. The market gave us back $5,500 into today's close when we're still short. Probably going to get elected long tomorrow. So I want to show you that because it's not fair to tell you the good things and not tell you the bad things. And volatility brings big bars. Have a look at this. S&P, the Wednesday's bar is about $3,600, just the bar. So you can't just be putting your buy at the high and you sell at the low, because your risk in between is way outside your risk parameters. So you have to have some idea about intraday trading or short-term trading. And if you're going to have some idea about it, you might as well have the very best idea, which will be the Danielcode. So those of you who haven't already thought of it, you should be thinking about coming up to the Gold Coast in November, spending 3 days up close and personal with me. Everything you ever want to know about trading, we'll be talking about, and I'll show you. And that's what's coming up. For those of you who want to be a super trader, if you don't want to come to the Gold Coast, you're most welcome to do a video tutorial. We've had enormous success with those. And just email me, jneedham@thedanielcode.com. Let me know where you live so I've got an idea of the time zone so I don't ring you in the middle of the night. And I will call you. We'll have a chat about your trading. And if you're interested in a video tutorial, happy to do that. We've got those running all the time. But for those of you that can make the trip to the Gold Coast, nothing like the real deal, is there? And we have lots of fun as well. It's not just all fun and all work, no play. We certainly have a good time. So our free trial of the whole website that we've been running for a fortnight is over on this weekend. Terry will switch it off, but remember, you are all, if you haven't already had a free trial, you're most welcome to simply log on at the Danielcode. Just click on the link that says free trial, fill out the form that asks for your name, address, you get a username and a password, and Terry will switch you on for a 14-day free trial at any time at all. And for those of you who've not aware of Trade Navigator, that's the software that I use. I'm a partner with them, and I do recommend it. It's not entirely perfect, but it gets better all the time, and it is very, very good overall. And Terry can enable a free trial for you of Trade Navigator as well. Finally, as we're just a few minutes over time, and I thank you for bearing with me, we have Vicky. Vicky didn't say hello to you. Vicky, you weren't here when we started. Great to have you with us. Rob from New Zealand's with us, my mate. God, it's a long time since we've had a cold one together, Rob, isn't it? Dear, oh dear. Anyway, I'm always happy to show you the compliance pages because futures trading has a lot of risk involved with it, and but if you don't know how to trade, the risks, I promise you, are very substantial. You can lose all of your money very quickly. So for goodness sake, don't risk real money trading until you have learned to trade properly, and the best place to learn to trade is here at the Danielcode. So shoot me an email, jneedham@thedanielcode.com, and I'll be more than happy to talk to you about your trading, what you want to do, where you want to go with it. And that's about us for today, folks. Thank you, Rob. Have a good weekend. Yeah, Friday, 11:30 here. Getting sunny, Rob. I did have a fall in the pool earlier this week. It's still a bit cold, but it's getting there. Jeff, glad to have you with us. Hank, as always. Adrian, of course, and Murph. Wonderful to have you all here, and stay on top of it, because trading is likely to keep being fast and furious next week as well. Thank you for being with us. Bye-bye for now.